Phillips. Known Drew for years here, but excited now that he's gone to Content Stack in the last year. If you haven't heard of Content Stack, they're a leading headless content management system platform. They power brands Air France, KLM, Asics, Burberry, Mattel, Mitsubishi, Walmart. Basically, these are teams that are about making content less painful and more adaptable to all of the just chaos that's in all digital marketing. And I noticed recently when we were doing our research before the show, like you guys landed visionary levels on Gartner's Magic Quadrant, Forrester reports, well done, and rolling out personalization engines that kind of mash up the AI, the automation, real-time audience insights, right?
Yeah.
Not an easy thing to pull off, Drew. And you've done stints, obviously, for Content Stack, where you're doing partnerships, but Adobe, Signals, I know where you were doing training and work as well. But I mean, you've been in data-driven content for, man, you've got scars going back years, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the very beginning of my career, because when I started my career, like my very first job out of college, which I usually don't put on my resume, and it's not because I'm not grateful to them or that I didn't enjoy the work, but it was one of those that, it was about a year working at a law firm doing marketing and figuring out what that looked like in 2003 to 2004. And so, there was that component of looking at what their client list looked like, where the conversion rates were doing well, how do we get in front of those clients? And that was probably what really whet my appetite. And I learned quick. I was like, okay, so my dad's a lawyer. My oldest brother's a lawyer. My sister-in-law is a lawyer. My brother-in-law is a lawyer. My youngest brother is a lawyer. And so that was the experience that taught me that being a lawyer was not what I wanted to do.
I was about to say, like,
yeah,
who ditched who?
yeah. Well, and my family would have supported me no matter what. I'm lucky in that way that you're, typical, upper middle class family. If your dad's a lawyer, you kind of want to follow in those footsteps. They were like, do what you want to do. So when I got to that law firm, and my undergraduate degree was in graphic design, so I was building, I was doing everything from like the signage on the buildings to their website. And by the way, don't ever look at like the Wayback Machine to what I had put together for their website. Is really bad. But the gist of it was, I was like, I am enjoying, like, in the moments that I have to spare on the clock, I'm looking at the data about where their clients are, and I'm looking at what the conversions rates are for the different geographies. And this was in Southern California, right? So each district sort of had its own challenges, its own problems, its own clientele. Like Riverside is really different from Newport Beach, which is really different from Needles, right? Lots of meth cases in Needles, probably. I don't remember, but a name like Needles, it's got to be. So that was where I was like, oh, geez, okay. So all of the time that I had spent in undergrad learning how to design and build digital experiences, that was fine, but I really, really was interested in the data part. So fast forward, Ford Motor Company, I got to work with digital agencies like VML and put together, how do we figure out where people are after Hurricane Katrina? Like literally figuring out, okay, where are these people? Like there's not data coming from the city of New Orleans because that was everything was destroyed. And so it was like doing a little bit of work on that side, and then fast forward again to doing a little startup in Vegas where, it's sort of like the mixture of everything, and doing web design, doing marketing, doing partnerships, doing all this stuff for this little startup. And I remember a meeting when we talk about data, this one cracked me up. And this was actually the beginning of me like really getting serious about it. Was we had a marketing agency that they were a small local group, and they walked through their demographic ad buying stuff. And I'm like, okay, you're telling me that you want to pitch this to 18 to 35 year olds. Fine, whatever. but we had like a very much more specific audience. So what we were selling were jewelry, rings, bracelets, whatever, made out of surgical steel plates that you might have if you broke your collarbone or you broke your arm, if you needed to have. So the surgeon initially, he was like, well, I had a patient ask me to make a ring out of the plate that we took out of his collarbone. And so he did that. And then more patients asked for it.
Sure.
And so he was like, I'm getting these plates anyway. I've got like inventory of them. I'm going to start selling them at my counter. So we were like, yeah, like we're looking at this demographic chart that you're trying to use for ad buying. And I'm like, no, like we know exactly who wants to buy this stuff. It's his patients, but it's also people who have had those procedures done.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of motocross riders, a lot of MMA fighters. And that worked well because we were in Vegas, and, Vegas is the head of UFC. So we had really unparalleled access to Dana White and other people. Nice. And so when this pitch was going through, I just could see that there was a big disconnect between what traditional marketers viewed as customer data and what like the real thing was. And so like we had almost no budget. So it was like, all right, well, we're going to go hard on motocross and UFC and BMX. That was the first toe in the water. It was really getting deep into like, okay, how are we going to deploy an analytics strategy to capture this information so that we can actually figure it out, and a content strategy to marry into that so we can not just see where people are coming from, but like, okay, are they really interested in, the content, and is that going to lead to conversion? So yeah, it spent years then at Adobe seeing how that plays out for companies like McDonald's, and where they're talking about billions of dollars spent.
How does it play out for companies like McDonald's?
It's funny, like the foundation is not all that different. It's the scale, right? So, and there's another company that I won't mention the name of, but big entertainment company that they have like every form of entertainment you could imagine, right? They've got their movies, their streaming, their parks, etc. And I'll talk about how those are different, like how McDonald's is different in scale from what I was doing before by contrasting McDonald's and Company X. So when we walked in the door at McDonald's, our partner had done more than an amazing job, right? Like a class leading at a global scale job of painting a roadmap or drawing a roadmap. And that roadmap was really like, it was exactly what you would want as somebody, as a solution engineer, which is what my role was. It was like, okay, cool. I see the milestones that we want to hit. I see what those look like. And it's up to me to like make it reality, at least to the point that the teams that are going to be deploying it can. And the Company X didn't have that. So that was one of the challenges, right? Like roadmap versus no roadmap. When there's no roadmap, or at least not a unified one that the C-levels all the way down buy into, then that's a big challenge. And I guess that was part of the difference as well between what we were doing at Skeletal Metal, just our own shop. It's like we didn't need a roadmap because it was me, Justin, Tracy. Sometimes an agency would pop in, so we got to do a lot on our own. We didn't need the roadmap as much, like we knew. So there was that foundational roadmap. The other big difference that I would say, like the McDonald's way and what we were doing at Skeletal Metal, was getting that unified view of the customer and knowing how we were going to do it. So this was in, we'll say 2014, right? So this was like pre customer data profile.
Yeah.
Well, not entirely, but we still had to do that foundational work of finding a way to tie a customer profile to a single ID, right?
Sure.
It's a lot easier now.
It is.
And the trick was, the nice thing about McDonald's was that they had physical locations with Wi-Fi. So that was one way we could encourage people to authenticate.
Yeah.
They didn't really have an app. So that was the challenge. And then on the other side of the bad example of this entertainment company is they came, and it was around the same time. I think it was a little before, actually. They were like, okay, well, we want to have a unified view of the customer so that when they go to our parks, we can make recommendations to them based off of their previous purchasing experiences, ride experiences, and they didn't have streaming at that time, right? This was like 2013, 2014. But, any of the data that they had. And I was like, cool, we can do that, but
yep.
how are you going to identify who that person is? And how are you going to identify that person across those transactions? And one thing that people often forget when we think about like really rich experiences based off of, we'll say machine learning in this case,
sure,
is that like the view of a single customer isn't what your goal is. Like it's nice, but you have to see what that behavior is across everyone. So it's like, yeah, like if you want to make a recommendation to somebody based off their previous viewing behavior or their previous purchasing behavior, you need to know more than just what that person bought.
Yeah.
You need to know what everybody bought so that you can see who has a profile similar to that person that we're going to be queuing off of.
Yeah. There's like 16 different versions of product recommendations, right? It's not a, everybody goes, yeah, it's easy. It's like, no, are we trying to expand the whole category of behavior? Is their first purchase? Are we trying to drive profit? Are we trying to drive top line? Like, what are the things we're trying to do here? Yeah.
And so where McDonald's succeeded was that they figured that problem out quick, like really quick. We knew that they were going to have SMS messaging as part of their, outreach and part of that personalization track. So we knew that was great. We still had to get that conversion data and be able to associate that with a profile. It was like, okay, well, they're going into your restaurants. They might need to use Wi-Fi, find an incentive for them to log into Wi-Fi in your restaurant. Great. I don't remember who it was that laid out the plan for the app, but those are the real heroes in this story. It wasn't me. Those were the real heroes in the story because the McDonald's app is what really triggered that incentive for people to convert underneath authenticated profile, right? And now everything that you see across the app and the in-store experience and even the digital menu boards and the drive-through, these were all things that we were talking about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But there was that one single hook of you need to get that unified authenticated profile and pull that across as many channels as you can.
It's so much harder than people think it is. It was hard. I mean, it's still hard today, right? Yeah. There's so many little silos and fiefdoms inside of every company where people are like, well, I have that, but I won't share it. And also we do attribution differently than you do. Also, we have our own data cleanup. Also, it's still one of those where like those data engineers for us everyone thinks it's set it and forget it. And you're just like, oh, no. Yeah. It is not that easy to get this data set and that data set to just chat nicely back and forth. They rarely do. Still
do you guys use tools like Segment or I'm partial to Lytics since I work for Content Stack and we bought Lytics at the beginning of the year? And
we're more into the data engineering, so we're doing more like DBT level stuff, right? So like again, we have like full-time data engineers that are doing some of that, but the same premise though, right? Like you can do a few different versions of it. Yes, they're plugging in and they're tying again CRM data sets, like trying to unify HubSpot and Salesforce analytics simultaneously is way more complex than people think it is. Same thing, and just trying to get like stuff like even just click-through rate and other things from like typical paid media. Sounds really easy, but then you realize, well, this one's a like, and that one's a swipe, and this one's blah, 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 on and on and on and on and on. And all these little simple, nuanced questions become just slogs in terms of like, all right, we're trying to basically just get a click to lead number or a click to customer, cost per customer. And there is a ton of nuance in there that just people are not ready for and don't expect to see. So it's one of those things that's just so much easier said than done. So yeah, have data engineering and systems going back years just to get that data to
Yeah.
work nicely together. And yeah, there's tools out there, but yes, categorizing them and then being able to make sense of them, and then being able to run the machine learning and other stuff on top of that, and making sure that that's insightful. All headaches, right?
Well, I was going to say, we've got an awesome company here that like they were built on that foundation. Have you ever spoken with Viral Allen at Claravine?
Huh. No. How do you spell it?
So Claravine, Claravine.
Okay, cool. I'll look him up.
And I don't know who the founder is, but Viral has been at the helm for the last several years and doing an amazing job. And that's a big part of their marketing. I'm not going to put it into the marketing attribution and taxonomy category exclusively, but that's really like where, and they're working with big companies on it. And really great team. So, yeah.
Okay. I'll look them up. How does it change in the last, like recently? I mean, you've been at this new company for like a year now? Less than a year.
Not even. This is month 7. Is it even month 7? No.
How's
this is month 4. This is month 4.
Yeah.
And it's, well, it's funny because Content Stack competes against such a broad array of companies. So everyone from Sitecore and Adobe to newcomers like Sanity and others. And so from the content point of view, it seems like where it's changed the most is where that content is stored and where the compute is happening to request it and to build out the experiences. And so that's where you're seeing companies like Sanity do well, and they do a good job of it. They used to be called Graph CMS, High Graph. So now they're called High Graph, and they're really focused on like they're built off of GraphQL infrastructure, so everything can be compiled at build time and put together in these static experiences or static built pages that are really fast, performant, and still pulling in data from like edge networks that are going to have all that information they need. So I think that's been interesting to see how CMSs have popped up to be more innovative. We look at the legacy players like Adobe, and Adobe's an amazing company. They're so much faster. And when I worked there, I felt this way, and I saw it firsthand that they're so much faster to adapt than what their size would dictate. And that's been true. So we do compete against them quite a bit, but there are also instances in which we will work together with them. Not on Adobe Experience Manager stuff typically, but yeah, a number of different plays that we've got. So where I've seen the content space change is, that basic infrastructure, and some of them are slower to adapt than others. Like Sitecore is still taking a long time, and the adoption rates of their cloud offering are pretty low. That's at least what I understand, right? Not here to talk trash about them. I think they do good things. But then you've got the Sanities and the High Graphs and, a handful of others that are really leaning into like building a much more technically friendly CMS that's going to be up to speed with like what the latest cloud infrastructure support. But the data side and the content side, which is what Adobe figured out, when I joined, and that was really a good set of circumstances where it was like, yeah, I happened to be somebody who had a lot of experience with content and a passion for data. And so Adobe worked out really well for me. They had that figured out. They saw this coming decades ago, right? It's amazing what they've done. And we see the same thing. And where we would differentiate is that it's not just one piece of the puzzle that has to be what we would call composable. It needs to be the full stack. You need to have data that's accessible and transformable across channels. But then you also need to have the content that can marry to that data, and adapt based off of that data at, the
Easier
fastest
said
speed
than done.
possible. Yeah. So
Right.
we're in a good spot, and we're getting recognition for it. And, I'm lucky to work with some of the consulting firms, some of the really large ones, and they get it too. What we hear from them consistently is we enable them to do those things that they've been advocating for with their clients for years, that, they would be able to piece together a little bit at a time with disparate technologies. But with Content Stack, you get the best of both worlds. Like, Adobe does give you that full breadth of data and content so that you can have that personalized experience, but you've got to buy into the Adobe stack. Whereas Content Stack is like, cool, you have your own customer data platform. Great. You can activate that data with content across all those channels without having to buy into the full Content Stack suite of capabilities. So it's pretty cool.
What's the pain point and the goal for those then? I mean, because you've talked about, like you hear personalization at scale. Is that ultimately the goal? Is it conversion optimized content? Is it content generation with ease? What do you think the holy grail is that people are chasing?
Oh, so I don't know if there's a single holy grail. The hottest thing that people are talking about is agent to agent, and personalizing based off of that. That's something that we're really looking at as like a big opportunity ourselves, because we are well suited for that as a composable first content management system. That content is easy to access through an API or through MCP. And we've already got our MCP servers up. So if you need to hit an endpoint to request that content and transform it. So here's a quick example is a grocer. And we are working together with one of those that would typically be considered a competitor of ours. But like we've housed all the content for this grocer. It's huge, one of those huge ones. It's not Kroger, but it's one that's got, thousands of locations. They do billions of dollars a year. And so that's a ton of content for one, right? They've got content that's owned, but most of their content's coming from third-party sources, CPG companies that they sell and stuff like that. And so massive amounts of content. And so we make it easier for them to build their landing pages and build all their marketing materials and stuff like that. So it's great. Very basic, cool, nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes sort of use case. But then it gets interesting really quick, because they want to be able to personalize on those landing pages based off of region, based off of individual user I mean, it's a grocer. They've got more data about us than almost anyone else, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so they've got another journey orchestration tool as far as marketing, so they can schedule like what kind of messaging would go out for users in this segment and across these geographies, all the different ways they might segment that data, and then all the different channels that they're going to syndicate that to. And of course, one of those channels, we own the content for that. And so we're plugged into this competitor of ours so that we can personalize that content based off of the context that's coming from that journey orchestration tool. So we're seeing a lot of stuff, and then a lot of B2B stuff. So, and financial services. Financial services is interesting. We had a call earlier today talking about a large international bank, and international banks, they've got retail banking, they've got corporate and investment banking, and we think about the content requirements for investment bank. Those are really high value interactions, and they're happening in every language under the sun, and they're highly scrutinized. Right. So they have to go through strict review processes. You can't just plug in.
You can't use the word may and stuff like that. Holy crap. It's a tough place to write intriguing and volatile, kind of interesting viral copy, it's like, yeah, good luck. They have to be so careful with what they can say that it can be an absolute nightmare to get. You're like, I'm just trying to say, come and check it out. They can't do anything like, no, we will not make your life any better. No, like you can't do even like the simplest of like calls to action based off any sort of like hedonics whatsoever, right? So
Right. Yeah.
we used to do some in like, I mean, this was with like financial advisors and stuff. And I remember the stuff that they would pull out of the level of scrutiny was ridiculous. We were just going 10 people on a call and they're, basically it's like being surrounded by lawyers and letting them write your marketing copy. And you just go like, dude, this sucks.
100%. Yeah.
Nice.
So that one is compelling. Cool. I haven't seen where that's going to go yet, but that's a good use case for, modern content supply chain with data. It's like you've got really tight, strict requirements. Mm-hmm. How are you going to scale that to make sure it meets the legal scrutiny that it's going to go through? And there is an argument for AI to step in and fill in those gaps, right?
How much of it is like LLM based generative copy versus like, hey, we have 10 different versions that have all passed some committee, and we just pick from one of them and we mix and match the combination?
Yeah, so it's a good question because it depends on what your process looks like, right? If your process is heavily human first to make sure that it meets those standards, then you may do that and then iterate based off of that one master. But there is an argument for let's have the AI generate it first because we can apply those constraints up front based off of the tools that are available, right? And just plugging the prompt into ChatGPT, most people aren't going to be good enough at prompt engineering to get it to meet those requirements. But that's where tools like, we've got a brand kit, but you've also got tools like Typeface AI and Copy AI and Jasper and Writer, all of which, you'd be able to save those like rules, I would think, across all of those.
You can save the rules, but I there's always the challenge of the agent ignoring the rules, right? The longer the set of rules gets, the more likely it is that stuff starts to sneak through the cracks, right? So there's always that fun little balance of how do we make it short enough that it's easy, but also strict enough that they actually stick to that governance, and also not long enough that they lose the script, right? And there's always this weird kind of balance between those things.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
They're just like humans, short and long-term memory, right? Like there's a reason we do like creative briefs that are a page, because we're like, it needs to be that simple and that specific and not so complex that, we have like one focus for it, right? We find that like we've got to and had to have given, like we had a pretty big cell phone provider come through with just this litany of lists of things that like our content could and could not do. And then the more we got into it, the more I'm like, we can't promise you this level of like, you can never mention another brand. You can never mention another copyrighted entity. You can never, I'm like, man, like cool list, but you can't do that. No one else can do that either, right? Like no one's figured out that level of governance on their agents, right? Like the closer they get to it, the less likely they are generative.
So I totally
like, hey, just pick one of the 6 that we approve, right? And we've got these 6 and you can just pick one of those 6. So it's still kind of customized, but it's closer to like a persona based customization, right? It's like pick from one of these safe buckets versus come up with something that's genuinely original.
What if you were to break it into steps and have it check one for each step? I mean, would that become too arduous? Like, would it get to be to the point where
we have it? No, you can definitely do it because you can lay out and you can orchestrate it, right? So you can have it go check. Because like, I mean, they go through stuff right now where it's like you have kind of like security layers where you go, okay, well, first things first, does this prompt that I've been given, does it have anything in there that implies that I'm trying to be jailbroken? Are they asking about my database? Are they saying, hey, wipe all your memory type stuff? So there's absolutely like a series of steps behind the scenes that you can put in, and you can absolutely lay out tasks so that there's like, go through these 5 steps. Very much so. And oftentimes, and they're getting better and better and better, right? Like every time I was playing with ours today and I was just like, damn, that's smart. Like just, I mean, it was on your profile, quite frankly. I was just going, hey, give me a few other kind of tips and tricks or whatever on Drew. And I was just, again, I was like pleasantly surprised at how good the answer was. So they can definitely do it. They can chain them through. They can go back and check their own feedback loops. And a big part of, I think, a good process is that it has that, right? You have to check, I think, two things. You check the person that you're sending the response to, saying, am I adapting to what they want to see and hear?
Yeah.
And then simultaneously, you have another feedback loop we call the market feedback loop, where you go like, is this objectively a smart decision anyways? Because we found out there's a ton of really good ideas that if you don't adapt to the person that has to actually hand over the message, they won't take, right? Old example of this is like the number one location that company headquarters are located. Like you'd think like, oh, we're doing software, we should go to Silicon Valley, or we're doing grocery, let's go to Bentonville, Arkansas, or we're doing management, let's go up to Scrotonville or whatever for GE. No, they're where the founder was born. And you're just like, yeah, it's not right. It's just what happens, right? And humans have the same thing. Like a big part of the stuff that we find with them is that humans, the best message for each person, like when you ask for an elevator pitch or whatever, their answer is always what they like. Like I'm very, very in tune with my answer, which is always like, I want a data-driven answer that's like more analytical. Yeah. But the biggest problem is the best salespeople ask the most questions, and that's because then they can walk a mile in the shoes of their audience. And most people only use their own referenced shoes 99% of the time. But if they're not in that mind and mode, you can go, okay, cool, we're adapting and we're sending this message to XYZ person. This person's very much into like social proof or something. Yeah. It's like they'll see it and they'll be like, no, that's not good. I want data. And you go, well, cool. No, you want data. They want social proof. Yeah. And you should adapt your message. So if you don't sprinkle some of that in, they'll reject it and they'll tell you to rewrite it, or they'll consider it a bad and not utilize it anyway. So there's a little bit of a balance that you kind of have to do as you go through it. So it can go through, but it is absolutely a balancing act. And then again, the more you do it, the more savvy they get, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like the personalization that people were doing a year or two ago, even, right? For just outbound. Hey, saw you worked for XYZ company. I thought that, and everybody now is like spam, delete, delete, right? The bar has been pretty significantly raised in 2 years, right? You have to be very personalized, very, right? You got to go very deep now. So yeah, you can do it. Again, the more you do it, the more you start to see the leaky bucket, but it is better. It's way better than I am. I have one that I'm kind of like addicted to. I have my own AI agent that I call Prof and the professor, and Prof writes and rewrites and fixes most of my copy and content because it's, orders of magnitude better than I am at it.
Is it one that you've built, or is this a publicly available one?
Mm-hmm. No. It's one that I've built and is available. You can go play with it if you want. It's on Wrench. We made a system so you can build and develop your own agents, and you can share them across your company, and you can share them publicly and stuff like that. And I like Scott Galloway. If you've ever heard of him, you actually kind of look like him. He's got glasses, bald guy. He's professor of branding at NYU, and he's kind of like an influencer of sorts. Swears a bit, but he's a savvy, clever, fun guy that swears, and I wanted to talk to that. So I created Prof and kind of went, go ahead and do it. But I mean, many times a day, just because I go, I want to talk to someone who's data-driven, who thinks through at the strategy level, but also swears. And that was it. And it's absolutely addicting. Absolutely addicting. So.
Yeah, it was Prof G. Marcus that I was listening to this morning on my run.
I like him, right? I like his style and conversation. It's like reasoned responses. He does a lot of research. So same thing, like one of the steps in mine is I was like, I want you to, if I tell you to write a blog, I want you to actually go research it. And I want you to do opposition research. And I want you to tell me if I'm full of shit, I'm full of shit. So like part of the task queue is you need to actually go and come at the counterpoint and give me the zag when I give you the zig, and actually go, wait, what's the counterpoint? So when I write blogs and stuff, comes back and goes, okay, heads up, by the way, the data doesn't support your position, because I didn't want something that was just helpful if it helped me be wrong. I wanted objective, right? So I actually put that into the task queue. So yeah, you can. The agents are nifty. I mean, because we made them, like, I know everybody can make them, but we wanted to start to just explore how and whatever. But we started making little personal ones that you can just write a couple instructions and then start to evolve them, add more data sets, connect to live data sets, connect to publicly available data from competitor data sets and stuff that's visible. it starts to get kind of nifty. And again, to your point, the really cool stuff happens when you do, and it's hard, but when you get that data from like creative and contacts and third party marketplace data all in the same place at the same time, then you can start doing some really, really cool shit. But it's very hard to get to that point, right? So a big part of it, at least what I've been working on for a while, is how do you get all that data in the same place at the same time from publicly available sources? So see how quickly you can get people to plug in. But
I think that's well, that's what I've seen as being the biggest challenge. And I think as a company, we've seen that as well. We hired a lead for change management because it's not that hard to get an individual to change their mind, but getting an organization to change their mind and the way they do stuff is, you've got any given decision.
Don't hold your
you've
breath.
Got a business leader, a tech leader, and a legal, and they all have different opinions,
at least,
right?
Right. And and you have like your ambassador, and then you have the detractors, and you have each of them that is in different stages of like the buyer's journey, or each different phases of like adoption, market and technology adoption. It's crazy complex. It's way, way, way more complex than I thought, because we had that when people would go like, hey, what do we pass off? And you're going, well, who are you passing it to? Just because it simplifies the conversation on the back end, right? It's, if you can go, who are they? And it's like, oh yeah, they're, they approve nothing. They just want the simple version. It's like, okay, cool. Like, hold back the white paper, right? And then just pass them the 10-page deck, But it ends up being kind of a big deal. So that's fun. That's very fun.
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad that I got to continue like the data and content journey, especially at Content Stack. There was, when I dug into AI and focusing almost exclusively on that last year, that was a really good exercise. But it didn't. It was an exercise. I didn't feel like I was at home, right? So. But that's an important thing to do, is you've got to stretch yourself. You have to exercise new muscles. You've got to learn new stuff. And then when you bring it home to data and content, like, where I consider to be my home, it all comes together a lot smoother because you've built more muscle. Our corporate philosophy right now is like, you know what? There is enough competition, enough people that are building the LLMs, building the agents, building this and that and the other thing. We really want to make sure that we're the conduit for all of that to come together, and not necessarily be that single place where people are doing it, but we want to be able to hook into it because we know that, there's endless solutions out there.
Plus the thing too is you don't want people to have to learn another tool, right? You're going, there's so many tools. They already have their tool. They often have their favorite tool.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a very grown up and kind of a mature take on it, right? There's so many, there's so many times and situations, like when I do when we hire, I've hired a few in my day, professors and early startup people and hobbyists and everything else for like behavioral data science. Like one of the best questions, or like the best indicators of a really good one, is when they tell you not to use AI. Because there's a ton of them that are just like all AI all the time. And I go, you're an idiot. It's stupid expensive. It's slow. It's ridiculously heavy in terms of compute. Have you seen like the cost for ChatGPT to answer one of your questions is like, it takes like this much water burnt. Like it's a massive, massive amount of energy to answer any single prompt one time. It's huge. It's incredibly like inefficient in the sense of like, well, look, if you can just use a search query from some sort of compute-based problem that's using if-then statements, you want to use the if, like always, always, always. And right now,
getting it optimized with an LLM is impossible, right? Like, because an LLM is probabilistic, not deterministic. So by its nature.
Yes. So, I mean, one of my favorite things, I think, is a very grown-up and mature sentiment where they're like, don't use AI for this. Don't, like, let's go do statistical analysis. Let's go do whatever. But let's not waste a ton of precious resources on stuff that's in many cases potentially not actually going to matter. Right. So it's always been a good one too. So I appreciate that approach, right? How do we enable it? versus try to magically own it. There's a lot, and man, is there a ton of resources being wasted on that. Makes the whole space like hard to work in. A ton of people are coming up with brand new products like I feel the pressure to come up with new stuff every 3 to 6 months, right? And you have to adapt your products every 3 to 6 months just because of new market changes. And you're like, dude, this isn't going to stop. I don't know how everybody handles this, because I feel like not that I start over, but it's a new game every 3 to 6 months.
That's wild.
Yeah.
How do you handle that request, right? There's the dilemma of meeting what the market is asking for and meeting what the market actually needs.
It's a good question. I mean, because man, that's tough, because there's a ton of change management associated with it, because I mean, oftentimes what you want to manage them and do you want to be really, really cutting edge, or do you want to be optimized for like profit? Because you're not both, right? Oftentimes, if you want to be really, really bleeding edge and you want to be the very first, like, cool, you better be ready to burn a massive amount of cash, because you're going to be building things that will be irrelevant in 6 months. Or someone can come out with some tool and your stuff could be, again, just like, oh, whoops, we did that, but turns out that's not actually a problem. So you oftentimes want to optimize for like, okay, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to good, fast, cheap, kind of the old premise that you've all heard a million times? And you go, which one are we trying to do? And I do finding out which one that they're in helps a ton, because you can go, cool, we can go build something that's proprietary and it can stay on top of all of the underlying technology and how to assemble that. We can go that route. But you need to be comfortable that that's not the cheapest way to go, because the cheapest way is to very much step back and wait a little bit till the dust settles and use last year's models, because they're orders of magnitude cheaper. Yeah. And there's a ton of people that just don't have the staying power to go, like, we're not all ChatGPT where we can literally burn twice as much money as we make, right? They're going, it has to make money. It's like, it's hard to make profit while operating in that space. So in many cases, people are working towards market share and things like that are very much important KPIs. You can do almost anything with market share once you have it. Yeah. But if you don't have it, there's a ton of things you can't do, like stay in business, right? Yeah. So a lot of it is managing expectations and understanding like what you're trying to do and adapting to that and trying to be comfortable with it. Again, to your point, I think the big part of it is, what are we going to be the best at, right? And are we going to generate the best content, or are we going to compile and assemble the best content? Right. And is the best, like, this is back to like that product recommendation. Are we trying to get them to buy the first product they've ever bought from us? Or am I trying to max out their lifetime customer value? There's many, many different ways that we can expand someone and give someone product recommendation. Impulse buy? Am I trying to just get them to buy one more thing? Or am I really trying to change how they decide on a product? And so making those decisions and understanding that is a really kind of a big part of it. Again, all that boils down to, what do you say no to? That's where people go, oh, AI is everything. It's the fix for everything. And I go, no, it's a thing. It can't be ignored. But there is a ton of wisdom in when you don't use it. So,
yep. You're right. That's and it's something that I had to learn the hard way, because I am one of those that, the adage to he who holds a hammer, the world is a nail.
Sure.
And there were those moments like, oh, I'm doing all this stuff in AI. I might as well try AI to compare these two data sets. And it's like, oh, no, bad.
Ooh. And they're so bad at that. Dude, I mean, just the number of times in the last week that I've had people like, oh yeah, your tech, we're trying to get it to just do this. And you're like, well, what is it? And it's comparing just 2 different spreadsheets, but each of those spreadsheets has multiple tabs and multiple formulas. And you're like, just so you know, none of them are good at that. And it's not even necessarily the right tool to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many, if I had a nickel for every time someone would be like, yeah, I just built an LLM to whatever, do lead scoring, do whatever, give me a data-driven persona. And I'm just like, it can't do that one. It can't do that one. It can't do that one. Like, you have 3 out of 5 steps that it can't even do. So it's making it up. And they think they've got this really savvy thing, but your numbers are bullshit. They're absolutely fake. So all day, every day, I see those. It's hard to get around it, but
I often ask the question, like, how does a human do it? Like, how do you do it? And a lot of times it's like, okay, well, if you're doing your lead scoring by your gut anyway, then okay.
Close enough, right?
Yeah. And in some businesses that's really valid, right? Like if it's not like a B2B sale where you know what the size of the company is, their expected capital expenditures,
Sure.
all that. It's like, yeah, you do need to have like it's probably more of a machine learning approach to that, like where
hmm
you've got the.
hmm
But if it's
Consumer data
yeah,
is harder to come by, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I do find that, I mean, that's the thing too. A lot of it when you want to see, because we usually take the machine learning approach, we're usually doing like high touch, high value, bigger, fewer, better clientele type products with like high
yeah,
lifetime value. And when you see those lists, oftentimes they get a little, okay, cool. I can see why that one, I can see why
yeah,
this one, I can see why this one. And it either validates or it at least has unique, but then they're kind of going, I could see why this one would be where it is or whatever. But they usually do have to go through some kind of like gut check flow. I mean, although the good news is almost all of them are subjective, or at least they have one I would call like vector location in there where
mm,
they have like, oh, they need to be this size from that size. And the challenge that they'll get to or come to is, again, there's usually one where they're like, and they're males, they're 18 to 34, which is oftentimes you're just like, yeah, but in the age of the internet,
yeah,
especially, that doesn't matter anymore.
yeah,
It's oftentimes way less telling now than it used to.
yeah,
And a lot of times they'll do, and they'll put some stuff in there that sounds like maybe a good idea, and oftentimes it's in there. I mean, but oftentimes it's just a lot less telling than people think. So it's oftentimes the nice part is like you have the ranks of stuff to look into, but also it's very healthy to realize that like when you look at those data sets, sometimes like the fact that they're, say they're male and 18, it may mean that they're more inclined to be a customer, but if the dividing line is right in the middle, it went here. And
huh,
that means they can still easily be female. They could still be a totally
yeah,
different age group or whatever. And if you look at the data inside of that row specifically, you'll see that there's like, I mean, there's little parabolas and stuff where you're like, well, there's positive and there's negative. And if they're female, they're potentially a little bit younger. And if they're male, they're a little bit older. But overall, if they're male and 18 to 34, that's the average. But all of a sudden, you kind of get into the persona
yeah,
data where you're going, well, there's actually 8 different ideal profiles,
yeah,
and you can actually split those into 32, and you can split those into. So oftentimes there's a bit of a challenge because we still want to know and understand what we still want to be able to interpret it. And a big part of
yeah,
machine learning is like, hey, now it's doing enough calculations that kind of the whole point is you can't really totally make sense of it. You can see the top 10 and the
yeah,
bottom 10, but it's deciding on 10,000 different columns. Like, so it's more complex than your brain can handle, and it's doing it that quickly. So a big part of the output, which sometimes frustrates people, is just like, we're going to give you a yes, no for every person, or we're going to give you one product for each person. And yes, we can give you the descriptions of like, hey, here's the reasoning behind it. But oftentimes the total number of reasons is just so beyond what they can handle that they have to be comfortable with some level of,
yeah,
all right, cool, I'm going to skip that. The good news is the LLMs are really good at taking that data and summarizing it, right? So if I have 200 columns or 2,000 columns in the decision, I can hand that to
mm,
an LLM with a set of instructions and go, all right, I want you to look at the top and the bottom things. I want you to interpret like how much they matter for this person. And
mm,
then I want you to cross reference with the content and creative to see if that product is mentioned or whatever in the typical content. And if it is, then use that in a message, right? That stuff I find LLMs are good at because it's closer to summarization than it
yeah,
is actually thinking, because they can measure, the amount of content that's in their statements, where they can't, even though they say they can, right? They're not
yeah.
really doing arithmetic and stuff like that. They're usually not actually doing that level of thinking. So,
Gee, that I really like that approach, and one of these days I'd love to dig into it and see how you're doing it.
I'll
Because
show you
that's
anytime, man. Dude, I want people to look at our stuff, poke holes in it if we're wrong, but I think we have a decent one. We don't have it all figured out, but I do think we're a little bit faster than a lot doing it.
yeah,
So,
I
but
think so.
anytime, my friend, anytime. Where can people find you, Drew?
Well, geez, where can they find me? I am not. That's kind of a funny thing. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think my profile is Drew John Phillips. Let me just double check. But I am not on LinkedIn that much because the whole BDR world has decided it's not. Yeah. And if you have like individual questions, things that you want to reach me directly, for this audience, I'll let you hit me up on my Wasm email, which is drew@wasm, WASOME .digital.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dig it. Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure. It is always a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much for organizing this. And
always fun, my friend.
I always learn a lot.
All right, cool, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.